Beautiful. And that looks good there. All right. And I will share my screen with everybody now. Beautiful. All righty. So let's get this ball rolling, I guess you could say. Welcome back, everybody. I know I have a number of new people, as well as a number of people that I've worked with personally, and some people that have definitely tuned in before. So a wide variety. Very, very happy to have every single one of you here. Public speaking and providing these kinds of presentations is I actually get a kick out of this stuff. So I'm very happy that I can provide you this information, this knowledge. And really my overall goal is to provide you a good perspective and trying to break down all the complexities and myths and just general bullshit and garbage that is out there. And for any of you that have worked with me before or have heard me speak, I'm very much about simplicity. And this presentation was actually really interesting because I actually did it a couple of times, and every time I did it, I was finding I was getting too complex, too caught up in my own details and stuff like that. So I really tried to distill it down to really the main points that I think are the most important and hopefully are going to be the most valuable for you. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Dan. I'm a pharmacist by training. I have happened to stumble into the area of weight management, not only through my own weight journey and weight struggles, but just seeing a large population of patients and individuals that really are still not getting the appropriate support in the community. And so I essentially do this full time, not only with my business, Healthcare Evolution, but also as a practicing pharmacist and about a bazillion other things that I potentially do. So yeah, for questions and stuff like that, we will save them until the end as I kind of go through things. As I said, there's a few detailed or a little bit more slides than what I usually have. So I might be kind of going a little bit quickly. Do put up your hand or what have you if you feel like I'm going a little bit too quick. I certainly can slow it down, but I will do my best to kind of find a nice balance of trying to get through the information, but also not taking too much time. A few disclosures. I always like to present these just to show, where I'm coming from, where my financial interests and everything like that might be. So essentially, these are kind of the companies and various organizations that I'm affiliated with. Either I own them directly, such as Healthcare Evolution, or I do consulting with them, or am I doing some kind of contracting work. I sit on a number of boards and other research aspect of things is kind of, I just like to have my fingers in a number of things. So this is, I think that's pretty much all of it. I've significantly cut down over the last few months. So I'm trying to streamline my overall process, but I still am doing a number of things here and there. And also I have not received a speaker's fee. There have been tickets paid for this event, obviously. But I have not been received a speaker's fee or any kind of support from, say, a drug company or something like that for this particular presentation. A quick note, as I said, I started the recording there at the start. I record these videos partly for promotional purposes, but also so that you can go back and watch them whenever you'd like. So after the event, you'll be sent after we get it uploaded to YouTube and stuff like that, it'll be an unlisted video and you will have access to the video to go back and watch and rewatch whatever portions and stuff that you might want to check out. Quickly, here's the learning objectives. Reviewing just why do we eat, right? That's something that we often don't talk about. We all know that we eat, but why do we actually do it? Why is it important? Understanding calories versus macronutrients, that whole aspect around that. And finally, that last one, I clearly did not finish that last learning objective, but it's basically to discuss the framework and approach that I look at when I'm working with patients and individuals in terms of managing their weight and how we look at these calories and macronutrients. So I wanted to create this. I was going to kind of pepper it throughout, but I just really couldn't figure out where to put it in at. And I just wanted to kind of create a few of these caveats, if you will. So while we are talking about, your calorie intakes, your macronutrients, weight loss, all that kinds of things, really the number one focus that we should always prioritize is our health. If health is not our focus, if we're, stuck on the number on the scale or doing an extreme diet or whatever, we're going to whatever means we feel that is necessary in order to reach a certain weight, really it's probably not going to be the best interest of our health. And so health should be the number one priority above all else. The weight, you're allowed to lose weight. You're allowed to have whatever goals you want. That is perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with that whatsoever. But always keeping in mind, are you sacrificing your health in the process of that goal? And that should never actually be the case. What I'm going to talk to you today about is a framework, but also kind of my approach. So it's my approach. It's not the best approach. It's not the only approach. It's just my approach. Hopefully some of this will work for you and be very applicable to you, but it might not be as well. Fundamental thing is to find what works for you and to always keep in mind that there is no best diet. We've done the research. We've got countless studies that show, keto, intermittent fasting, none of them are any better than anything else. Really what is the most effective measure is ultimately what's going to work for you and what's something you can sustain in the long term. And finally, simplicity is beautiful. I can't stress that enough. Simple, simple, simple. If you feel like it's getting too complex, if you feel like I'm getting too complex in this presentation, I probably am. And we need to back it off a little bit and go back to the basics. That's really one of the key points here. And then finally, consistency. You can have the absolute best plan in the world, but if you cannot consistently follow it, the plan is not going to work. The plan is not going to happen, and you're not going to see the results that you want. So first and foremost, what the hell even is a diet? Now, if we look at the Webster's dictionary definition of it, it's the kinds of food that a person, animal, or community habitually eats. So it's the things that you eat every single day. It's not set in stone by any means, but mainstream diet definition, we've kind of stole it. And a diet is generally considering something the food sources that you're eating in a restrictive manner in order to lose weight or for medical reasons or what have you. A prescribed diets, diets really kind of got this more negative connotation around it. I mean, it's still the food that you're eating, but when we think of diet, we tend to think of using something for weight loss. But really, why do we eat? And so, there could be a number of different reasons, everything from wanting to lose weight to just purely for fuel, to health, for pleasure. Like food is freaking amazing, so absolutely we use it for pleasure. And really, these aren't necessarily the reasons why we eat, but they're all goals that we can work towards with regards to our nutrition and even including pleasure, right? You could have a goal that you want to enjoy some of the finest foods in the world. Fantastic. You're eating for pleasure. There's nothing wrong with that. But really, when it comes to food, we are eating for energy and nutrients for life. Now, that's going to vary person to person, and things that we always want to take into account and be wary of is the quantity and quality of the foods that we're eating. The quality and quantity are going to definitely matter in terms of physiological functions when we're looking at your health, your performance, your recovery, and its effects possibly on your body weight. These are all very important things. And so we do want to have a balance of eating more nutritious foods more often than foods that are less nutritious. Now, I always say that there is no good and bad foods because there isn't. There's not a food that you can't have, and there's not a food that you should only have. There's just food. And food, I always talk about, is kind of like your friends. There's some friends that you like to hang out with a lot, and there's some friends you like to hang out with a little bit less. The same goes for food. But if someone were to say that I could never have Kraft dinner with hot dogs or whatever cut up in it, I would tell them to go pound sand because that's just not going to happen. And yes, that is one of my comfort go-to meals, if you will. Yes, is it processed food? Absolutely. Is it the healthiest for me? No, absolutely not. But it makes me feel good in the moment. It brings me comfort. It makes me feel better when I need it. And I have it, once in a blue moon, maybe once or twice a year kind of thing. So it's definitely more of that aspect of we use food for a variety of things, and keeping that in mind when you're thinking about the foods that you're eating and having. They do serve an important role, but so do the foods that are less healthy for you. Quickly review of energy balance here. When we look at calories, a calorie is essentially a unit of measurement, and it's a unit of measurement for energy that is contained within food. So when you flip over the package and you see the nutrition label there, it always has the calorie count per serving for that given food, whatever it is. Or you type it into Google, whatever. The thing with the calorie is that the calorie is the same across the board. I like an analogy. There's a guy, his name's called Sciat Fitness. He does a number of YouTube videos. Really fantastic content that he puts out. But I love the analogy that he said. He said, if we look at a mile, the distance of a mile, And we look at, say you wanted to run that mile and you had three options. You could run that mile in the ocean, you could run that mile on the beach, or you could run that mile on a paved road. In all three cases, that distance, that mile never actually changes, but how you get through or what you're running through in each of those miles does, right? You're running through water, you're running on sand. Those two are going to be considerably more challenging compared to running on paved road. It's still the same mile, it's still the same distance, but there's going to be that difference of what you're obtaining or what you're getting out of that workout. Obviously in the water, you're going to work out a lot more, on the sand more so than on the pavement. And so same thing with calories. A calorie is a calorie is a calorie. A calorie, 1 calorie in a donut is the same as 1 calorie in broccoli. They're the same across the board, it's the same amount of energy, but they're obviously going to have a different macronutrient composition. Where we get our energy or our calories from that our body utilizes and uses, the food that we eat, obviously, but also from our previously stored tissue. So whether that's from our body fat, our muscle tissue, glycogen in our liver, you name it. And these are all of the things that our body uses energy for. Basically, it's for you to do your day-to-day activities, but also to stay warm, repair the tissues, and further store more fuel. Now, energy in versus energy out. This is a simple law of thermodynamics. We can't get past it. We can't get beyond it. There's nothing we can do but to work with it. When the energy that you're taking in via the food that you eat is equal to the energy that you are burning, you're going to maintain your weight. When the energy that is coming into the body is greater than the energy that you are burning, you're going to gain weight. And vice versa, if the energy in is less than the energy that's going out, you're ultimately going to lose weight. That has to fundamentally happen for weight loss to occur. Now, of course, weight management, if you've heard me talk before, obviously it's very, very, very complex. And the factors that are going to affect your energy in and your energy out are a wide variety. It's going to vary person to person. There's so much crap that is going on in terms of all of these different respective things that the simplicity that I'm going to bring tonight might seem like I'm ignoring these factors and these aspects, but fundamentally the same principles are still going to apply. It's just keeping these factors in mind in terms of trying to make things more simple. And I always like to kind of look at it from this sense, is that managing our weight is extremely complex, but complex problems don't always need complex solutions. So if we can make something more simple, we can make it easier to ultimately manage it and a whole lot less overwhelming. Because as you can see here, the energy in and the energy out, there's a lot of crap here and it's definitely overwhelming. So just a couple of the things to keep in mind here, that's going to affect your calories in, calories out balance, all right? Calories out, I kind of wanted to briefly touch on this because we'll kind of talk about metabolic adaptation. If you tuned into my previous webinar, it is up on YouTube, you can check that out. But the calories in is influenced and affected by a huge number of things. So not only the thermic effect of food, and what that is that when you eat something, that's how many calories your body has to burn to break it down and to digest it essentially. Then we also have your exercise, so your planned exercise. So that might be going for a walk, that might be going for a run, whatever it is that you're doing, that's the various components there. Your NEAT, that is your unconscious activity. So that's your fidgeting, that's my hand movements. I'm very much a hand talker. All of those factors are going to kind of come into play. And then finally, your basal metabolic rate is just how much your body physically burns on a day-to-day basis just by existing, essentially. Now, as you can see, your NEAT activities in your BMR are entirely genetically determined. So they're going to be up and down and all over the place. If you're in a calorie deficit, your BMR is going to go down. Also, your NEAT activity is also going to go down. So you're going to fidget less. I wouldn't have as much hand talking motions and that sort of thing. But then it comes to thermic effect of food and your planned exercise, those are all going to be lifestyle dependent. More whole foods, unprocessed foods are going to have a greater thermic effect than processed foods. So what are the things that affect our calorie or energy needs? Or determining, I guess, what we want is those calories, energy needs. There's a lot that goes into it. It really depends on first, what is our goal? Are we trying to lose weight? Are we trying to gain weight? What are we looking at? What is our current body weight? So how much weight are we currently carrying at this point in time? What is your body composition? How much lean muscle tissue do you have? How much fat tissue do you have? Those are all going to play a role. Your biological sex, so men just have more muscle mass than females. Your age and your life stage. So as you get later in life, we tend to lose muscle mass. And unfortunately for females, as you go through menopause, that's going to cause hormonal fluctuations, and that's going to cause changes in terms of your muscle mass and that sort of thing. level of physical activity, purposeful just versus daily life? Do you have a busy job where you're quite physical? And then finally, aerobic versus resistance training. What exactly are we doing there? Some of the parameters in terms of what we should be eating are going to change in that regard too. So let's quickly touch on the macronutrients. So macro means large and micro means small, right? Nutrients is obviously the nutrients that our body needs. They provide us life and they provide us energy. The three main macronutrients that are in existence are proteins, carbohydrates, and fats. There is a plethora of micronutrients. Those are your vitamins, minerals, all that sorts of things. Your body still takes them in from the various foods that you eat. Very much this is outside of the realm of this presentation, but just knowing that if you have a well-balanced diet and a healthy diet, you're generally going to get pretty much all of the micronutrients that you need. So starting with protein. If you've heard me talk before, you know that protein is the king of the macronutrients. Everybody can benefit from more protein. There's very, very few circumstances where more protein wouldn't be of benefit. The reason why protein is so great is because it really makes up just about every single body tissue you have. Your muscle, your connective tissue, your bones, your hormones, your immune system. It is involved in essentially everything, whether making up the structure of it or the enzymatic processes in order to get your body to function and burn energy and all that sort of thing. As well, when we think about energy use and need, protein, one, requires the most amount of energy to break it down. So the thermic effect of food. So a steak's going to take a lot more energy to break and burn than, say, a piece of bread. It also is going to help to keep you fuller for longer, and it's going to help to maintain your overall protein or your protein turnover aspect and respect of things. Am I talking too fast? Is that why we got the hand up, or just in general? Maybe, possibly. I will try slowing her down just a tad for you guys, all right? Overall, when it comes to our protein turnover, as I've said, protein is constantly being in and recycled. It's not stored in our bodies or anything, but our goal is to basically be building more proteins than we are breaking down. And here's kind of the process. So we take in amino acids. Those are the individual units. We create proteins, and you don't have to know really all this stuff in between. This is like a whole biochemistry lecture all on its own. But we create these large complex structures that are still on a microscopic level, so you can't see them without a microscope. And then these proteins, these large molecules, get broken down again into amino acids. They then either get excreted or used for other processes and that sort of thing. So your body is constantly doing this process all day long. Amino acids. So I'm sure you probably heard of, your branched chain amino acids and your essential amino acids and that sort of thing. I'll briefly touch on them here. But proteins, the proteins that essentially do the functions in our body, are composed of these amino acids, these small little subunits. And here's the general structure. There's about 20 of them, 20 plus, I think now. And we have a combination of two. We have the non-essential, which our body can manufacture under any circumstances, any situations. Your body can just create them if you're not taking it in from your diet. And then we have the essential amino acids. And these are the ones that we essentially have to eat the food. That's why we need this fuel, is because without getting that fuel and food, your body is unable to make these essential amino acids, and therefore can't make the proteins, and therefore can't function optimally. So a big question that I always get asked is, well, how much do we need? And if we were to look at, say, most people on a standard Western diet, if you're eating some meat and that sort of thing, you're likely getting just adequate amounts. You're getting enough to basically prevent malnutrition. So you're not, leading to any issues. You're not getting muscle wasting per se and that sort of thing, as long as it has some meat protein. And for the most part, many people living in a Western world tend to be more sedentary. So we're not needing a lot of extra protein for growth and repair. But adequate does not mean optimal. Okay, so yes, we're getting enough to prevent malnutrition, but we're not getting enough to really do well and to have more of a higher level of performance or meet and reach our ultimate goals in terms of our lifestyle and our behaviors. So there's a big difference between living and thriving. And the evidence is actually starting to show that humans really need a lot more protein than what we were previously recommended to get. And I find a lot of people do not get enough protein in this regard. So reasons for increased protein intake. So these are just kind of a list of things or times when you might need more protein if you're doing any kind of increased training or physical activity. So if you're, especially if you're doing, say, resistance training, but even if you're going out for a walk every single day, your body is going to need more proteins because your muscle is being worked, it is being broken down, and it's going to need those amino acids in order to repair and build up the muscle. If you're trying to gain any muscle mass, strength, if you're trying to preserve lean muscle mass, we need more protein. If you ever get injured or you're sick or you're recovering from surgery, you definitely want protein in that regard. As we get older, we don't process proteins as well. So our digestive system isn't able to break it down to the same degree. So a lot of protein we eat might just pass out in our digestive tract. And therefore, we need to eat more protein in order to keep our protein levels up. So something always to kind of keep in mind. And then as well, if we're undergoing chronic stress or other pathologies or diseases or something like that, you're probably going to need more protein. And as I said, most people can benefit from more protein. Some medical conditions might warrant a lower protein diet, maybe kidney disease, but even the evidence is kind of shaky on that respect in terms of if you do have some kind of kidney disease, a higher protein diet is probably still going to be okay for you. But of course, checking with your nephrologist and that sort of thing. So then there's a few other conditions out there where maybe, but for the most part, it's not a concern. So let's talk carbohydrates, probably my favorite macronutrient in the world. And I'm sure many of you also do enjoy your carbohydrates as well. It's because they're freaking amazing, right? Carbohydrates are our energy life source. They're a lot of the deliciousness along with the fat and that sort of thing that are found in foods. But to quickly dispel some myths for you, first off, carbs are not killing you. For the love of God, it drives me nuts with the keto and carnivore groups. Like, fantastic. If you love that diet, awesome. But carbs are not the reason that people are dying, and they're not the reason why people are gaining weight. And low carb is definitely not better than some carb or even high carb. Or actually, there's one study that showed a vegan diet, high carb vegan diet compared to a keto diet, and the high carb vegan diet, they actually lost more weight. So there could be an argument made that high carb diets might actually be better for weight loss. Jury's still out on that, but ultimately, again, whatever works for you. Carbohydrates or sugar. So carbohydrates are made up of long chains. So basically, like proteins, we have these individual units that we call monosaccharides or glucose. I'm sure you've heard of that word. And basically, when they get into the body, we make it into more complex structures. And so we start looking at things like this amylose and amylopectin. Another big one that's made in our body is called glycogen. And that's a whole bunch of these little glucose molecules all conjoined together in order to be used as energy or to be chunked off for our muscles, our brain, whatever, to use them and to burn them and so that your body can do what it needs to do. And when we start looking at this as simple versus complex carbs, simple carbs are going to be things like table sugar. So they're broken down and there's fewer bonds between them. Complex carbs are going to be all intertwined in webs and big complex structures because they're complex. So that's when someone says you need more complex carbs. That's kind of what they're talking about. So, the glucose and stuff like that, that's going to be your juices, pops, and your complex carbs are going to be things like whole wheat breads, pasta, unprocessed grains, that sort of thing. So a few facts about carbs here really quickly. Basically, they require a whole lot less energy to be digested than compared to proteins. They are non-essential. We don't need carbohydrates to live. I mean, if we look at the keto diet, people are running around all the time without barely any carbs in their system. So you definitely don't need them. And to kind of really highlight this point here, carbon plus hydrate gives us carbohydrate. So carbon, that's one of the elements that are found on Earth. Hydrate is water, and so carbohydrate. And so carbohydrate, every single gram of carbohydrate that you consume and that is absorbed by your body will take a certain amount of water with it. And so when individuals go onto a keto diet or onto a very low carb diet, what they see usually initially is a very large drop in weight. And this weight drop that they see is water weight because you're depleting how much carbohydrates are in your body. So if you're depleting the carbs, you're ultimately depleting the water. And that could be anywhere from 10 to sometimes 20 pounds worth of weight that gets dropped instantly. And it's not fat, it is purely water weight. Same thing if you've been on a low carb diet and then you have more of a binge on the weekend and your scale goes up 5, 10 pounds even. That is all water weight. You've just replenished your glycogen stores in your body, your glycogen stores. You've taken up that carbohydrate and it's absorbed a crap ton of water with it. And ultimately that's caused that rise in that scale. But if you go back on your keto diet or low carb diet, you'll see that number come back down again. Okay. Excuse me. Functions, energy and storage. So glucose, glycogen, as we've already talked about. Muscle and joint fluids keeps things kind of moving and that sort of thing and nice and smooth. As well, your mucus, anytime you're phlegmy and coughing and stuff like that, a large portion of that is carbohydrates based phlegmy stuff. And then finally, GI health, fiber is very important, keeps everything running well and going good. What is the skinny on the fats? So these are called lipids and they have multiple kinds and multiple functions. The main one that most people are familiar with are fatty acids, but lipids are often hormones, so especially the sex hormones. They might also be, I'm drawing a blank on that right now. We'll come back to that. But fatty acids, as I said, are kind of the one that most people know, and they're going to vary in length. They're going to say saturated or unsaturated. So I'm sure you heard of saturated fats, monounsaturated, polyunsaturated. As well, they have a different configuration, whether they're in a trans or cis. Again, this is all biochemistry. You don't need to know this by any means, but just trying to give you guys a bit more of a background in this regard. And so one of the common ones that we often hear about is omega-3 fatty acids. All that means is that it's just like this chain down at the bottom here. And what there is that the third carbon from the omega end, we have a double bond. And so basically that causes a bit of a kink in the chain, and we get a double bond there. And that's what an omega-3 fatty acid is. And omega-3 fatty acids are good for you. One of the big questions that always comes up is this debate around saturated fats or not, and cholesterol and that sort of thing. So what we do know for certain right now is that unsaturated fats, these are polyunsaturated, monounsaturated, they have what's called a hydrogen missing. So if you look on this side over here where these cars are parked, there's basically the cars are the hydrogens, and then the lines in the middle are the carbons essentially, and we have a couple of hydrogens missing. And what happens is we get this kink in the chain, so they become bent like this. And so they're more fluid. They don't lie nice and flat and packed with each other anymore. They're kind of bent and kind of all over the place. And so generally when you look at them, they're going to be liquid at room temperature. That's going to be things like olive oils and that sort of thing. So they're just going to be liquid at that room temperature level because they're unsaturated fats. Whereas saturated fats, they're not missing any hydrogens. All the cars are parked in the parking lot. They're all neatly going to stack flat and nice right on top of each other. So at a room temperature, they're going to be solid or semi-solid. That's going to be things like your butters, your coconut oil, and that sort of thing. So should we eat fats? Yeah, absolutely. Fats got a bad rap. They're still getting a bad rap as to what fats you should eat, saturated fats, unsaturated fats. I'll touch on that in just a second. They're essential. They provide energy. They're the sex hormones, our cell membranes, our brain and nervous system. They have so many different uses and they're vitally important, even more so than carbohydrates. And I think a lot of people don't get enough of the good fats in their overall diet. Omega-3 and omega-6 fatty acids, we must obtain from our diet. Both of them are very, very, very good for you. Now, the thing I want to clarify here is the omega-3 fatty acids, we often hear that they're anti-inflammatory. So they prevent inflammation, damage in the body, all of those wonderful things. Omega-6 fatty acids tend to be what we call pro-inflammatory. So they might lead to inflammation in the body. And omega-6 fatty acids get a really bad rap because people are like, oh my God, they cause inflammation. This is terrible. You shouldn't eat them. The reality is that the inflammation that these omega-6 fatty acids cause are a good thing, right? We need some level of inflammation in order for our body to properly function. I want you to think of a time when you've rolled your ankle or broke a bone or something like that. All of that swelling and inflammation that happens at the joint where you've hurt it, that inflammation is bringing in nutrients and supplies to essentially repair that damaged tissue, as well to prevent you from moving that joint and to protect that joint. So that inflammation is a good thing. Too much inflammation, absolutely a bad thing. COVID is a great example. It's a viral infection, and basically it causes our immune system to go hyper inflammatory state. And it's not actually the virus causing damage per se, it's our body getting too inflamed and causing issues and causing a breakdown of tissues and stuff like that. So some inflammation is good, it is necessary, it is needed, but too much inflammation is a problem. Back to the cholesterol here. So HDL, I'm sure you've all heard of that. That is our good cholesterol. It's kind of like a vacuum cleaner. It goes around and sucks up the bad fat and the bad cholesterol throughout our body. The more of it we have, the better. This gets mitigated through diet as well as exercise. Both of those can help to bring that HDL cholesterol up. The second one here, LDL or your bad cholesterol. People will say that you can separate your LDL into a variety of different components, and there can be an oxidized one and not oxidized and yada, yada. Essentially, we're splitting hairs at this point, and to try and say that one person has good LDL and bad LDL, LDL is LDL. When we look at studies, when we look at the data, LDL, we just don't want too much of it. If there's more LDL, there's more bad LDL, and that's a problem. So one thing that happens is that trans fat and saturated fats, so fats that we find in processed foods, can cause your LDL level to rise. So it's not necessarily the fat itself that's causing the bad cholesterol. It's the rise, and it's causing a rise in LDL, and LDL is ultimately causing that increase in cardiovascular disease. And so as we can kind of see here, your change in total mortality, so 0 means there's no change. Basically, whatever you do is neutral, doesn't do anything. As you can see, processed foods, fries, croissants, whatever, 31% increase in your mortality. So if you're consuming more of that, or butter and bacon, so getting more of those saturated fats, your risk of mortality, so total mortality, which is death from any cause, goes up. Whereas when we have more things like avocados, good oils, fish, legumes, vegan type options, we get those monounsaturated and polyunsaturated fats, we get a reduction. So it actually helps to prevent or reduce your risk of death from any cause. All right, let's talk about the framework. Now, again, this is very general. Hopefully you can kind of use it to your own specific needs. Lots of components here. And again, I did my best to simplify it down as much as I possibly could in what I thought was most ideal and going to be just the best for you guys. But again, save your questions. If you have them, we will definitely go over them at the end, but hopefully I was able to cover everything here. So there's 3 components when I look at my framework here. The first one is generally our variables. Now, it depends how intensive, whether you're just starting out or you've done this for a while, or if you have other goals or you've lost weight and you want to do something else. You know, we need to look at what essentially is your goal, right? Is it performance, health, weight loss? What are you aiming for? Again, your goal can be whatever you want it to be, but health should still be your priority, right? What is your current body weight? That's going to play a role. Your body composition. Again, if you have more muscle mass, that's going to mean a higher basal metabolic rate, your biological sex, your age, your activity level. And if you've ever had any kind of previous dieting or restrictive eating patterns, those may also play a role in our overall process that we're looking at here. So these are all things that we want to keep in mind, and it's going to be more important to look at these as you go down the road and you get a little bit more further in terms of your nutritional health goals as to what tweaks and changes and stuff you need to make based on more of these variables. So obtaining your energy needs. So this is kind of point number 2 we want to look at. And obviously we're going to look at weight loss as our number 1 goal. That's pretty much why you all signed up for this aspect. So we're going to talk about it today. Again, the energy balance aspect of things, calories in has to be less than calories out, or weight loss will not occur. It's not because of the carbs, not because of the fat. You have to create a calorie deficit. No ifs, ands, or buts. That's the only way that fat will be lost from the body. Fundamentally, we want to find what's called in the industry the sweet spot, where your energy intake is allowing you to move towards your goals, but it's also supporting that optimal health and functioning. Again, going back to the health and functioning, that's what's really most important. The reality, what we're going to be doing here is we're going to be working with estimations at first, but this whole process requires trial and error. So trying something, seeing how it goes, changing it, and going from there. Whatever changes or whatever trial you do or whatever method you use, the fundamental piece that you have to do every single time is consistency. If you don't do it consistently, again, you don't really know if it worked or not. And a big question as to whether we actually know what we're doing. The reason why I really wanted to simplify this down is because there is tons and tons of equations out there. Like I could spend just hours on the various equations and stuff and how we calculate metabolic rate and even the laboratory methods and all that kind of stuff. But fundamentally, a lot of these equations will give us a predicted body weight or pattern that your weight will go to over the years. But in reality, each person's going to be different. Some people are going to lose less weight. Some people are going to lose more weight. There's a lot of variability. And again, if we look at that energy in, energy out balance of things, that's all going to be driven by that. It's going to be genetics, physiology, environment, where you live. All of those things are going to play a role in what your ultimate weight loss or how well or how quickly you achieve your goals are going to be. So we want to keep it simple. Simple, 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 simple. Again, that's the key message, one of the key messages here. And so we want to go back to goal body weight. And I've talked to, I'm sure, a few of you about goal body weight and what this means and the different respects of it. But your goal body weight, you can think of it as a number that you weighed previously, that you were comfortable at. Maybe you had gotten to that weight through weight loss previously. Maybe it was, before a certain time, what have you, but were you comfortable there? Was it a weight that you could maintain? Or is your goal body weight going to be a weight that you want to work towards that you feel like you could maintain? It's going to be something that, I could sit quite comfortably here, I think, and to maintain this weight over the long term, if I have the right tools and mindset and challenges to overcome and to get to it. Basically, it's going to be a weight where you would be the leanest that you wish to be, okay? So for me, as an example, I'm about 197, 96, 98, I kind of all over the place. Again, the scale goes up and down every single day. If you're not following me on Instagram, you can watch, I kind of post my scale weight every single day and how it goes up and down. But I'm sitting in this 196 to 198 range. The weight that I'm pretty much the most comfortable at is about 185, maybe 180. I'm going to just see where I kind of fall at. But I had done a hypertrophy phase, so I intentionally gained weight in order to put on muscle mass and to gain some of the muscle mass that I lost over COVID and such. And now I'm trying to get back down to my more comfortable weight, right? So 185, that brings me down, and that's probably where I'll end up sitting in the end. But I sit quite comfortably there. I don't really have to work too hard to maintain it. I feel comfortable. It's going to help me to stay agile for the various sports that I play and all those sorts of things. So it's a nice balance for me in my life. The other thing we want to keep in mind here is your goal body weight is your starting point. This is just a kind of a target. It's giving us a direction, a place to go towards. Do we have to necessarily reach that? I might get to 190 pounds and say, no, 190 pounds feels fantastic. I'm going to stay here. I look great, feel great, whatever, 190 pounds, that is my new target. That is what I'm going to go with. So it's just giving us a direction, a target to kind of look at, but you don't necessarily need to reach that weight by any means. And if you don't even know what your goal body weight is, you're not sure, you're kind of humming and hawing, pick a number and start. Pick a number that you want to maybe aim for and just go for it. That's the biggest thing. And I find a lot of people get too caught up in what is my goal body weight, what should it be, blah, blah, blah. And they're ultimately kind of using that as a procrastination method to ultimately not take action in order to make the changes they want to make. So how do we calculate your energy needs? Calorie intake for weight loss, take your goal body weight times it by 12. That's it. Daily calorie intake. I kind of hate this whole webinar aspect of things. You can't get people's reactions and faces. And when I make jokes, do people laugh? I have to laugh at my own jokes now. So, but yeah, daily calorie intake. I'm sure I'm seeing some boos and hisses maybe. I don't know. We'll see afterwards here. But that's really that simple. Now, the question you're probably asking is, well, how could it be that simple? Is it too simple? So let me take you through an example here. Goal body weight, say you're 200 pounds right now, your goal body weight's 170 pounds. Your daily calorie intake is going to be 170 pounds times by 12. You get 2,040 calories per day. That's it. Start eating 2,040 calories a day, and you will start to work towards that goal body weight that you're aiming for. It really is. That's it. Yeah. Now, go home, you're drunk. That might be something that you might be saying on your end of things right now. It seems way too simple. And yeah, it is very simple. And like I said, this is on purpose. This is to take the overthinking aspect out of it, to get you started in a direction and to just make it as easy as possible when you're dealing with something like your weight that is so freaking complex. It gives us a direction, it gets us started. The second thing a lot of you are going to be saying to me now is, and I hear it just about every single day, is that is way too many calories. I'm eating 1,200 calories a day. I'm not losing weight. How the hell am I ever going to lose weight at 2,040 calories a day? That makes zero sense. And the reality of the matter is that when we look at things like metabolic adaptation, again, not to give a plug to my previous presentation, if you go check out my YouTube channel, Dr. Dan-Weight Loss via Habit Mastery. In the previous presentation, I was talking about metabolic adaptation and what happens when our calorie intake is too low, and fundamentally how we need to bring that calorie intake up in order to lose more. So you have to eat more to lose more. And a lot of people don't believe me that's the case. And I'll kind of go over some caveats here and whatnot. But as you start to increase that and you trust the process, and maybe you just want to see if I am full of shit or not, people tend to go up and they start losing weight. And it's because we're bringing them out of that metabolic adaptation and properly fueling and feeding their body. So it may be simple, but I always recommend try it for 90 days. Give me 90 solid days and aim for about 75 to 80% consistency. Again, 100% perfection is going to be impossible. Over a 90-day period, it is just not going to happen. But if you can do it for 75 to 80%, and for any goal that you're trying to achieve, whether it's nutrition, fitness, or whatever, this level of consistency is reasonable. It's going to help you to work towards your goal, but it's not going to take away from your life and the enjoyment that you can have in your life, okay? So it's anywhere from 68 to 72 out of the 90 days. You aim for that calorie target that we just calculated, right? Whatever your goal body weight is, times by 12, and you aim for that. And I actually recommend getting out a calendar. Do it for 90 days. Every day that you meet your target, put an X. Each day that you miss your target, either too low or too high, put an O. Our goal is not to come under this calorie amount, not to say that 2040 is our calorie amount and we want to come 600 calories less than that. That means we're going to lose more weight. No, our goal is to come up to that calorie amount and to reach that calorie amount consistently. Will you reach your goal weight at 90 days? Probably not, but it's getting us moving in the direction. And of course, you can come tell me by that time whether I'm full of shit or not. If you've done it 80% consistency, and you still have not seen any results, then I am full of shit. If you do it for 90 days and you do it consistently, you'll probably see those results, and you can come talk to me anyways as well. You can still tell me I'm full of shit because I probably am. But yeah, that 75 to 80%, if you can do 90% consistency, yeah, you're going to get there more quickly. But 75 to 80% is what's reasonable. Even that's what I do. I go out on the weekend, I have a drink, I have a burger. It's never going to be 100%. It's all about finding that balance for health, for optimal life, and all that kind of stuff. Now, the leeway aspect of things. When I'm saying going up to that target, again, perfection is just not possible. It's not going to happen, right? But I do want you guys to think about, coming in with that target. You're never going to hit that exact calorie amount every single time. It's going to be impossible because foods vary and et cetera like that. But you want to try to be about plus or minus 100 calories around that target. So for example, if the target is 2,040 calories a day, your range should be anywhere from 1940 to 2140 a day, somewhere in that ballpark, 75 to 80% of the days that you're doing this, okay? If your calories fall within that range, you can consider it a successful day. So you can put that X on the calendar. If you fall below that or you fall above that, then you put an O. And again, that's okay. That's going to happen. You're going to fall below it some days. You're going to go way above it some days. That's just life. That's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just about getting back on track and then following it again and continuing on that same path that you were on. What if I have a lot to lose? Again, the equation stays exactly the same. Your goal body weight times by 12 will give you your calorie intake for weight loss. Now, one caveat I will say is that if you have 50 plus pounds to lose, we want to start with a more realistic goal body weight, okay? So let's say your current weight is 400 pounds, your goal body weight, your number one goal body weight is 200 pounds. Let's start with a goal body weight of 350 pounds. Get that calorie amount and start eating towards that. The reason why I say this is because as your weight goes down, you're going to have to eat less and less calories. And to suddenly go from, to 200 pounds, the amount of calories you'd eat at that point in time versus 350, it's going to be a lot less. So delay the inevitable. You're still going to be able to lose weight by eating at that 12 times 350 pounds. At that calorie amount, you'll still lose the weight. So eat more while you can. And then as you kind of adjust or you reach the 350, then shift it down to 300 and then shift down 250 and 200. Make it much more of a reasonable stepwise approach. And it's going to be a lot more realistic and sustainable for you in the long term. One aspect that I did want to quickly bring up here was this idea of calorie cycling. Now, this is something that I do with regards to my food, and there might be days where I have increased hunger or decreased hunger. And so the days that I exercise or lift weights or what have you, I am considerably more hungry. And in general, I always find that eating more on the days you exercise is generally beneficial. So I always want to try and eat more calories or a couple hundred extra calories on the days that I exercise. As well, women that are going through their menses, we have very good data to show that that week that you're kind of undergoing your menses, eating a couple hundred extra calories is going to help you stay in a much, much better mindset than trying to continue to restrict while you're having the hormonal issues that are completely out of your control and ultimately making you want to eat more. So it's going to help to keep things in a lot more balance for you. So this calorie cycling idea is days where you have an increased appetite, increase your calorie intake by 100 to 200 calories per day, entirely up to you. Days with a decreased appetite, decrease it by 100 to 200 calories per day, whatever works for you, but having a mix of the high and low days throughout the week. Example again, goal body weight, 170 pounds, calorie intake is 2,040 calories per day. So you could just eat that every single day if you'd like, or on your exercise or high days, you can have 2,240 calories per day. This is generally what I kind of follow is I go up an extra couple hundred to 200, 250 calories. On my non-exercise day, I drop it down a couple hundred calories. So 1,840 could be your marker there. And again, or you could eat the same amount every single day, whatever works for you. That's ultimately what's most important. So what about the macronutrients? So I'm going to touch on this. I mean, in reality, well, after the protein component, that could have been the presentation, but I will go in a little bit more detail on all of this aspect of things too. So again, what do I recommend? Focus on the king that is protein. Protein, protein, protein. Make that the center of all your meals. It keeps you fuller for longer. Your carbs and fat, you can kind of figure that out based on the remaining calories that you have when you have your protein intake, okay? So it's more versatile, it's more important. To calculate your protein intake, it is your goal body weight times by 1. That's it. Again, super simple. So yeah, I see you're still drunk. I kind of wish I was at this point. It's been a long day. Goal body weight, 170 pounds, calorie intake. So this is the calorie intake that we came up with. Protein intake is 170 grams. Cool. So that's how many grams of protein that we're going to be aiming for on our days for the 90 days that we're going for. Now, if we remember, as I showed you there, 1 gram of protein has 4 calories within it. So 170 grams of protein times by 4, 680 calories of that 2,040 are coming from protein. So you're going to have about that many calories from protein sources. The rest are going to be a mix of carbohydrates and fat. So again, probably thinking, yes, I am hammered, but again, it's, you're going to be saying it's too simple or it's way too much protein. Again, these are things that I commonly hear. Too simple. We want to keep it simple. Stop overcomplicating it. That 1 gram per pound, just keep it nice and simple. Don't use the kilos, use the pounds. It's going to give you a much better understanding. Way too much protein. Again, the science is showing we actually need more protein and most people are not consuming enough. Now, it's relatively simple to say, yes, eat more protein, but it's not always going to be easy. I get that. That is very challenging for some people is that, yeah, it's going to be tough to maybe incorporate more meat proteins or, vegan options or what have you, but finding the sources that ultimately work for you is what's going to be the key. And I wanted to provide you guys this right here. This kind of gives you a nice example of a variety of different protein sources. You have your eat more section, right? These are all your healthy, lean proteins that we definitely want to aim for more of. Lentils and beans, they're also really good ones. I've got a real kick for edamame shells and stuff now. Eat some, these are ones that we don't want to eat as often, and then eat less. So these are the more processed ones. They're okay every once in a while. If you want to make some shake and bake or whatever, go for it. Have a burger on the weekend, nothing wrong with it. We just be mindful of how much of it we're eating. And because I know you will ask, let's review the carbohydrates and fat. How do we figure that out? So fats is usually my second thing that I look at. I don't go to carbohydrates as many people might think. I look at your fat intake as again, I think fats are, again, a kind of one that gets a bad rap, but also it's one that people don't focus on enough, in my opinion. And what I find with fats is that they're filling, but they're also vitally important. You need fat to burn fat, if you will, okay? So your fat intake should be 0.25 times by your daily calories. And you're going to get from that the calories of fat you should be consuming each day. So example again, our goal body weight is 170 pounds. Our overall daily calorie intake is 2,040 calories per day. We take our fat intake, 0.25 times by our daily calories. And what we get is we get 510 calories should be coming from fat. If we go back again to a couple slides previously, 1 gram of fat has 9 calories within it, okay? So to do that calculation, 510 divided by 9, we get about 56.6, and I rounded up to 56 grams of fat. So that's how much fat we should be trying and aiming for to try and eat as kind of an overall balanced. Basically, this fat intake is what we're saying is 25% of your daily intake, and that gives you a reasonably good amount of fat to consume on a day-to-day basis. And for your fats, obviously, again, focusing on the polyunsaturated, monounsaturated, your avocados, liquid oils, that sort of thing. These are all your fantastic fat sources. Over here, your less so healthy fat sources. And then the ones obviously over here, try to limit or reduce how much of these ones you have because they have more saturated fats, they have more trans fats potentially, and that sort of thing. Now, what about the carbs? So this is going to be just the rest of your calorie intake for the day after you've accounted for your protein and you've accounted for your fat intake. Now, technically your veggies fall here, but veggies, they generally don't have any kind of real calorie intake. So, and people just need to eat more veggies. So go hog wild with your veggies. Please eat more veggies, okay? But focus on your whole grain, your unprocessed carbs if possible. Your carb intake can vary depending on your activity level. So the more active you are, you're probably going to want to have more carbohydrates. That's just kind of a general rule of thumb. You're burning glycogen, you're burning glucose when you work out and stuff like that and being more active through the day. And so if you're not properly feeding your body with those carbohydrates, you're not going to have the optimal energy for optimal function. Now, also keep in mind that if you are vegan or for cultural reasons or whatever, you might have a diet that in general is just higher in carbs. That's totally okay. You might adjust your protein based on whatever it is that the way that you eat. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? That protein intake is just a goal, a target to potentially look at, but you can adjust that based on your own preferences and lifestyle that ultimately works for you, okay? Calculating your carb intake, again, we start from the beginning. So we've got our protein intake at 680 calories are coming from proteins. We got our fat intake, it's 510 calories from protein. Carb intake is going to be your remaining calories essentially. So we take our daily total calorie intake of 2,040, we minus the 680, we minus the 510, and we get 850 calories for carbs. 850 calories for carbs. When we do the calculations, 1 gram of carbohydrates has 4 calories within it. So you get 213 grams of carbs. 213. I know, mind blowing, right? That seems like a ton of carbs than compared to what I'm sure some of you might be eating. But if you're gaining weight while eating, so if your goal body weight is 170 pounds and you're gaining weight by eating 213 grams of carbs a day, you are not in a calorie deficit. You are getting extra calories from somewhere. If you are following all those other macro things, you are just getting too many calories somewhere else. But 213 grams of carbs, yeah, you can eat that many carbs and you can still lose weight. You can still eat more carbs than that and you can still lose weight. I consume upwards of 300 to 350 grams of carbs a day and still can lose weight because I'm in a calorie deficit. Again, here's your carbohydrates. You're good. Eat some, eat less. Hopefully a great little list for you guys that you can use and print off. Your vegetables, again, go crazy. Eat the rainbow. Eat as many vegetables as you can. Should be half your plate. Try and consume more of them. We definitely do not get enough veggies on a day-to-day basis. A quick note on portions, just because I've had this question come up before. So I always like to mention that, if we look at, say, chicken breast, for example, and people say 170 grams of protein, well, okay, one chicken breast is 112 grams. So does that mean I'm getting 112 grams of protein? It doesn't. 112 grams of chicken is just the chicken itself. So just that chicken portion that's on your plate. But within that chicken, what you have is 30 grams of protein. So 4 ounces of chicken is 112 grams on the plate, on the scale. but it actually contains 30 grams of protein that your body can utilize and take in order to build muscle and do whatever it's going to do, okay? And so again, that 30 grams of protein, you times it by 4 because there's 4 calories in every single gram of protein, and you get approximately 120 calories or so. Now, you definitely can measure, weigh, and be as accurate as you like. You can use whatever method or process ultimately that works for you. There's a number of different apps and things that can certainly help you and support you to be the most accurate as possible. Again, as long as it's not being detrimental to your overall mental health and mental well-being. So what you really want to focus on though, or if it's not detrimental, or you can just use your hand portions. Your hand portions, you can literally take them anywhere, go anywhere with them. And you can generally pretty much figure out your plates and how much you're eating just based on hand portions alone. So one portion of protein is 1 palm, portion of veggies is 1 fist, portion of carbs is 1 cup handful, portion of fats is going to be 1 thumb, kind of from that second knuckle down. That's 1 serving of your fat there that you're looking for, or portion of fat. And to give you guys some perspective, so if you're looking at 170 grams of protein, for example, 1 palm portion is going to be anywhere from 20 to 30 grams. Males is probably going to be closer to 30, females are going to be closer to 20. And so 3 to 4 ounces of cooked meat, 2 whole eggs, that sort of thing. 1 cupped hand is 20 to 30 grams of carbs, and 1 thumb is 7 to 12 grams of fat or so, okay? Give you a bit more of an example here, dividing that 170 grams of protein throughout the day. So for males or for just about everybody, when you're having a main meal, 20 to 30 grams of protein should be kind of an estimate there, and then 10 to 20 grams for each of your snacks throughout the day. Again, it can vary. You might have 3 meals only, no snacks. You might have 6 meals a day, whatever ultimately works for you. When it comes to your hand portions, women, 1 palm is going to be about 20 grams of protein. Men, 1 palm is going to be 30 grams of protein. So if we have 30 grams or 170 grams of protein we want to consume in the day, we take that, we divide it by 30, and we get 5.6, rounded up to 6. So basically a male would aim for 6 palm portions of protein per day in order to meet their protein needs for the day. Once you figure that all out, you basically can just use your hand portions in order to figure out how much food you have going on the plate. All right. So I have obviously been talking for a long time. I promise I am almost done here. But the reality is that this entire presentation could have been your calorie intake, goal body weight times 12. We could have just done that as your calorie intake aspect of things, and that could have been the presentation. But I think really the protein intake is very important because protein serves so many vital functions, and we should make it a focus and highlight it as one of our main macronutrients that we're aiming for. So you could just literally look at calorie intake and protein intake, and then carbohydrates and fat, you just kind of figure out on your own, right? You just kind of make a mix of them for whatever it is in order to make up the rest of your calories for the day. That could have been the presentation. I could have ended it there. We went in a little bit more detail. Hopefully it didn't add too much complexity, but fundamentally that's ultimately what it did. Don't worry about it. You can just focus on these 2 things. The next big thing is just consistency, right? Make it as easy as possible and do it as consistently as possible. Don't focus on perfection, but 75 to 80%, something that's reasonable and something that works for you. If you're currently, 30% consistent right now, when you get to 60% consistent, you are going to be a very different person within 90 days, right? That consistency aspect is going to play a big role. And this is going to have far-reaching effects on every aspect of your life. If you are consistent with anything for a period of time and you aim for that 75 to 80% consistency, you're going to see big changes in whatever change that you're aiming to make, okay? Whether it's activity or what have you. Again, this is just a starting point. Our weight is extremely complex. There's multiple contributing factors, problems, that sort of thing. And again, complex problems don't always need complex solutions. A few final tips here for you. If you're hungry or you're finding as you go along, there's an increased hunger level, looking at maybe increasing your protein, increasing your fats, or maybe increasing your overall calorie count. Maybe you just need more food than what you're currently getting. That's a good indicator, right? So you can adjust things in that respect or increase your veggies. There's lots of ways that you can go about it. Too many carbs. Yeah, if you feel like you're bloated or you just don't feel good on that many carbs, then eat fewer carbs, eat more fats, okay? Adjust it as you feel necessary. Again, these are just guidelines you tweak and modify for whatever ultimately works for you. How are you tracking? Scale, clothes, tape measure, whatever, doesn't really matter. You can do it daily, you can do it once a week, basically we want to look at the trend overall, right? On a day-to-day basis. Again, if you're following me on Instagram at the official Dr. Dan, you can see that my weight goes up and down every single day. Some days are up, some days are down, but fundamentally the trend is heading downwards, okay? You want to allow for at least 2 to 4 weeks before making any changes. Okay, so going for that kind of range there. So if you've been measuring and things are either not changing after 2 weeks, or they're not changing after 4 weeks, or they change a little bit, then you'll wait for that period of time before really making any changes. But I would recommend trying this just for 90 days, going with that goal body weight times 12 and trying to be within plus or minus 100 calories of there. And then come talk to me at the end of that. Totally. I'm open to it. If it didn't work, then let's chat. Let's see where maybe things didn't go wrong. It's not going to work for everybody 100% of the time, but I would say for about like 98% of people, it's going to work. And remember, 75, 80% consistency. You can use a food journal. Tracking obviously is going to help you to be that much more successful, because then you can have a better idea of how consistent you were. So that definitely can be a good way to go about it, whether it's a handwritten, MyFitnessPal, Chrononutrition, Excel spreadsheet, whatever floats your boat. Some level of tracking is ultimately going to help you, and you can do it for the 90 days. You can do it for a period of time and then switch off of it, but then you'll have kind of an idea of where things are at for you, right? Final points. If you've been chronically dieting or following a 1,200 calorie per day diet or less, eating more may definitely be challenging, and it may also be terrifying. Okay. So yeah, 1,200 calories. I'm not losing weight now there. And you want me to eat 2,000 calories a day? How in the hell do you expect me to lose weight? I'm going to gain weight. I'm going to do nothing but gain weight. This is normal. It's a slow working progress. Work your way up to it. It's a process. Don't think you need to go from 0 to 100 overnight. You can slowly build yourself up to where you need to be. But yeah, it's going to take a few steps, and just taking your time with that is so very important. So a criticism that I'm sure some of you may have heard is that I have eaten more before and all I did was gain weight. So first and foremost, if you've had a weekend where you've, say, eaten more calories or kind of binged or whatever, and you step on the scale on Monday and the scale's up, well, yeah, that's going to happen, because you're taking up that water, that glycogen into your muscles, and you're replenishing those glycogen stores. Then as you go back on your normal diet for the rest of the week, you're going to ultimately come down. And then you've probably had periods where, you know, you've gone off your diet or fallen off the rails for a month or whatever, and you've gained 10, 20 pounds and it was fat. Well, what was happening there is that when you were off the rails, you were too restrictive likely beforehand. And then when you went off the rails, you were in a massive calorie surplus that ultimately caused all of that weight gain. But if you go up to this level that we're looking at right here and eating more in this sense and eat in that consistency of 75 to 80%, you will kind of start seeing those results that you're ultimately looking for. Now, weight gain can still occur, not only for the carbohydrates, not only for the water aspect of things, especially if you're more active and stuff like that. There might be some fat gain depending on how long you've been chronically dieting, how much metabolic adaptation you've got going on, but it will be very, very, very minimal, if any at all. The studies all show that people maybe gained a pound or two and then they started to lose again. So keeping that in mind, we often have a knee-jerk reaction when we see any increase in the scale where we just shut it off. We're like, nope, that's it, that's done. But your weight varies day to day. Your clothes might feel a little bit tighter because as your muscles swell with glycogen, you're going to feel that weight and you're going to feel your clothes are fitting more tightly. Again, this is normal. This is just part of the process. So giving it that time to kind of start working. And if you see one high number or clothes are just tight one day, that's okay. Continue to work through it and continuing to stay on track with where you're at. Okay. So my big 4 messages here: health, consistency, calories, and protein. That's it. Those are the 4 things. Health is always number 1 important. Consistency is always key. Calories, like we've already talked about, and protein. Protein is protein is protein is protein. All right. So thank you very much, everybody. Definitely a longer presentation. So thanks for everybody for hanging out with me and stuff like that. We will take all the questions and whatever you guys might have at this point in time. As well, I want to kind of just drop this one in here. So this will be a free webinar in November, Wednesday, November 24th at 6 p.m. You'll get a link after this presentation where you can go and sign up for this one. Basically, we're going to be talking about medications that are causing me to gain weight. Are my medications to blame? Is there something going on there? I will go over the details, the evidence, and kind of what's maybe happening there. And can we actually do anything about it or not? Okay. And then in December, we're not going to be doing any events, no event whatsoever there. We're going to take it off of the Christmas holidays, obviously. And then January, we will be talking potentially about exercise, the not so holy grail of weight loss. We might talk about another topic. It all kind of depends. It's all an ebb and flow and stuff like that. So yeah, stay tuned. Of course, if you have any questions or want to shoot me an email or have any feedback, I'm definitely going to be sending out a link after this presentation. So if you guys have feedback for me, please, please, please shoot it my way. Would love to hear it, whether it's good or bad. Don't worry about hurting my feelings. I want to be the best that I absolutely can be in providing the best information for people out there. So good or bad, drop it, let me know. The channel as well for YouTube, I'm constantly putting videos up there. Dr. Dan Weight Loss via Habit Mastery. You can check out my previous free webinars as well. I have a Facebook page, groups. You can check out all those. At the official Dr. Dan is my other social media links. So Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, I think I'm kind of on as well. You can check me out there. And finally, my website, if you need additional support, if you want to book a free consult with me, feel free to book in there. Or if you want to just shoot me an email with a question or what have you, I'm usually pretty good. I get a lot of emails in a day, but I do my best to get back to every single one of them. So yeah, let's open it up to questions. I will stop sharing now. Dun, dun, dun. Or I just nailed it. It's all possible. Bum, bum, bum. Oh, all right, here is one. Would fruits fall under carbs? So yes, fruits would. Fruits are kind of a funny one as well. It's kind of like some vegetables have higher amount of carbohydrates. Fruits, generally, I would consider them a carb source. You can look to more fruits that say have less sugar per fruit amount. So berries are a really good example. Whereas grapes have a lot of sugar per grape kind of thing. So those can add up into a whole lot more calories and carbohydrates in that case. In general, I would just kind of consider your fruits, whether they're berries, they're grapes or whatever, have them fall under that carbohydrate source and keep it in that respective things in terms of your portions and stuff. Any suggestions for water intake? Water intake, I mean, it all kind of depends on what we're kind of looking at for water intake. If you're looking for just a general amount that you should be drinking or trying to aim for, the standard adage of 8 cups per day gives you a pretty good ballpark. We do get water from carbohydrates because, again, carbohydrates take up water, carbohydrate, water. So you do get water from the food that you eat. But again, this is one of those things a lot of people don't do is they don't drink enough water, right? So I have my 1.5 liter. I fill this up anywhere from 2 to 3 times throughout the day. And it keeps me hydrated. I drink when I'm thirsty. When I'm more active, I drink more. There's all kinds of factors, again, that are going to go into it that are going to drive how much you ultimately drink or feel like drinking. But yeah, anywhere from the 8 cups a day is a good starting point. If you're only doing 2 or 3 cups a day right now, slowly trying to increase, going for 3, 4, 5, 6, whatever kind of works, because you're going to ultimately feel like you need to go to the bathroom more frequently. I can promise you, the more consistently you drink the water, the more calming effect that ultimately happens in your bladder, and you don't have to go to pee every 5 minutes kind of thing. So that is definitely something to keep in mind, and I try to keep it as simple as possible. In terms of just trying to drink more water, out of sight, out of mind, insight in mind, right? So this goes with me everywhere. I always have it. Generally, my body's pretty good at telling me, like I can feel kind of a dry mouth kind of thing right now from just speaking so much. So my body is telling me you need to drink more water. And generally my body throughout the day is pretty good about telling me that as well. But sometimes I go hours without drinking water until I suddenly clue in and I'm like, oh, I definitely need more. But having it right next to me kind of keeps it in mind. And yeah, just helps me to get more water in. So that would be kind of my suggestions around that. And again, finding what ultimately works for you. Alcohol. Is it possible to include it in your week and still lose weight? Absolutely it is. Again, it's just like anything else. Like, I had a couple old fashions over the weekend. So it just comes down to the same the same respective process of how much calories you're consuming, right? So if you're having a glass of wine, that's X amount of calories, on your Saturday night or whatever like that, you might go over on your calorie amount, or if you can work it in, fantastic, or you might go over and that's totally okay. So just keeping that in mind that, yeah, you can absolutely have alcohol. If you're binging every weekend, it'd be kind of starting to look at, well, what are exactly we doing, or what are our goals, right? Binging is not really as, binging on alcohol isn't always the most health promoting behavior, if you will. But if you're having a glass of wine with dinner or something like that, go for it. Just kind of incorporating it, or just realizing that that might be a day where you're not as consistent as you'd like. And that's totally okay too. So you definitely can, finding what works for you. And don't go for, there's a lot of like low carb, low calorie options and stuff like that. I've tried some of like the low cal beers and whatnot. They all taste like garbage. So if you're going to have beer, just have beer, have good beer, because why not enjoy it if you're going to have it, right? So yeah, keeping that in mind, that if you're going for, have it, and same with food. If you want to have pleasurable foods that taste really freaking good. Go for the best of the best. Don't just have, crap food from fast food joint or something like that too. So hopefully that helps, gives you some perspective. Does the goal body weight times 12 equal calories train if I'm doing weight training 4 times per week? So it very well might. You would kind of have to play that by ear, depending on how you're feeling and stuff like that. Because yeah, you are weight training more. You're going to need more calories on a day-to-day basis. Again, you can start with that goal body weight calorie intake and see how it goes. Or right out the gate, on the days that you weight train more, just put another 200 calories on top of that for those days that you weight train. And, you go on days that you're not training, you put it to a lower calorie amount and see how it ultimately goes for you. Again, it's a trial and error process for wherever you're starting. That equation essentially is going to give you kind of a starting point, and then you kind of adjust it from there based on how hungry you are, how you're feeling. If after 2 weeks, the scale is going down too quickly or something like that, and then you can adjust and tweak as you go along. But start with the goal body weight times 12, go from there and see how it goes. Hopefully that answers that. Thank you. What if the medications you take decrease your appetite and you aren't fulfilling the ideal calorie intake? Okay, so great question. So if you're possibly taking one of these weight management medications, that's certainly going to make the whole process more challenging, because part of what we're trying to do with increasing your calorie intake up to this goal body weight times 12 calorie intake is we're trying to mitigate the metabolic adaptation that often occurs when our calorie intake goes too low. So what we want to try and ultimately do is either find the tweaks and changes that we can maybe incorporate to get our calories up to where we want it to be more in that goal area. Or we can kind of continue with where the medication's currently putting us, and we can just see how it's going. But if it's 1,200 calories a day and you're not losing weight, fundamentally you're metabolically adapted and your body is needing and wanting more of those calories. So finding a way to get up there, or maybe even possibly pulling a little bit back on the medication itself if you can, and it's agreed with your doctor, so that you can consume more calories to get where you want more consistently. That might be another option, and that can kind of help the appetite kind of kick in a little bit more, so that, yeah, you're able to consume and eat more. But if you're not fulfilling the ideal calorie intake, some ways to kind of boost that calorie intake up a little bit more quickly, if you will, would be, say, looking at things like looking at fats and stuff like that. So whether it's like olive oil, so I have a protein shake with olive oil added into it. It not only allows me to get my good quality fats, but 1 tablespoon of olive oil bumps me up 120 calories. So it gives me a good amount of calories there. So finding those little tweaks and changes that you can incorporate in order to try and meet that calorie intake, if it's possible for you. But if we're falling underneath it, we're going to be running into the issue of, not necessarily meeting that consistency aspect of that within plus or minus 100 calories. News really helped. Same questions, Bobby Joe. Hopefully that makes sense. Feel free to if you want me to clarify anything. You mentioned menses. Is there any research suggests that women burn more calories during this time? So there isn't research to really say that women are burning more calories during their menses. What we're more looking at with menses is that when you're in a calorie deficit, just on a general day-to-day basis, it's challenging, right? If you're trying to lose weight, if you're trying to be mindful of what you're eating, it's going to be harder. You're going to be hungrier at times, okay? But when it comes to menses, what essentially is happening there is, yeah, we have the hormonal aspect of things. There's emotional changes, there's hormonal changes, and those are ultimately going to cause you to be hungrier. And estrogen and changes in estrogen has been shown to increase your hunger levels, not because you're burning more, but just because that's what one of the hormones does, and because it wants to promote weight gain and that sort of thing. So that change in that flux can ultimately lead to you just craving and wanting to eat more, but not necessarily because your body physically actually needs more food per se. So there isn't evidence to say that women are burning more calories during menses. It's just more that the hunger increases. So if we bump up our calorie intake during that period of time, that can ultimately just make it more easy from a mental perspective in order to continue with your overall process and things that you're working on. Great questions, everybody. What about menopause? It totally feels like I'm a wind-up toy stuck on a wall. Fantastic. All right. So menopause, menopause gets tricky as well. Again, this is kind of a change in life stage. And certainly if you're finding like you're more hungry or things aren't as manageable for you, then yeah, again, trying to increase that calorie counts. So, if you start at the 12 times the goal body weight, but you're finding, what, every day I am effing hungry, and you've tried some tweaks in terms of increasing protein or increasing your veggie intake or what have you, and it's still not mitigating and managing it, and okay, let's bump up the actual calorie intake. Maybe let's go up 100 calories to start. Do that for a couple of weeks. No, I'm still freaking hungry all the time. Let's go up another 100 calories. Hey, 200 calories works. I'm feeling pretty good there. I'm getting some more protein. We're mitigating, we're managing this. A big thing that we want to keep in mind is that, again, menopause is another tricky situation because you're getting a flux in hormones, and in particular, you're getting a drop in your testosterone levels. Drop in your testosterone levels is going to mean a loss of lean muscle mass. Lean muscle mass leads to our basal metabolic rate. And so we want to try and retain as much of that lean muscle mass as possible. So if we can get more protein and more calories in order to maintain that muscle mass, that's ultimately going to make the menopause aspect of things in terms of weight gain and also maintaining our weight much more easy. Hopefully that makes sense. What are your thoughts on meal delivery services such as HelloFresh, Sunbasket, etc., for obtaining the right amount of protein, fats, and carbs? So great question, Al. So the meal prep services, absolutely. I mean, HelloFresh, for the most part, you can kind of look and they'll give you a breakdown of the various menu items and stuff like that, and how much protein, how much carbs would be in per serving. So they give you that nutritional info, and you can kind of look at it and see, does this work for me or not, depending on what my nutritional goals are. They have a number of different options and stuff like that you can, modify and change based if you're vegan or what have you. So definitely, it can be an option. It's quick, it's easier. You don't have to think about it, just all the ingredients come. It is more expensive, yes, but it's kind of that convenience aspect to make life a whole lot easier. So it definitely can be done. I'm certainly looking right now at kind of meal prep services where they just bring all the food to me and then I just got to heat it up. Just because my life, I work so many hours and stuff that it would just make life easier and try to find that carb protein fat ratio, same kind of thing. So they definitely can be beneficial. They definitely do provide healthy options. And yeah, if it's something you're considering, for sure, go for it. If you can't afford, say, the meal delivery services, there is an app. It's called Meal Lime. They're actually based in Vancouver, BC, I believe. So meal and then lime, like the fruit. What they do is they basically give you like a recipe and say, chicken Alfredo or whatever like that. So you go, oh, yeah, that looks pretty good based on what I'm going for. It gives you kind of the nutritional breakdown on it. I think you have to pay extra for the nutritional breakdown on things, but you can basically get this list or this meal, and then it shows you all the ingredients that are in it, and then it shows you what you need to go and buy. So you need 3 chicken breasts, you need 4 whatever, need this, that, and the other thing. So it's kind of like a meal prep service, but you go and do the grocery shopping and then you come home and you prepare it all and stuff like that. So meal line. I'll put that in the chat box here. So that's kind of one of those resources to definitely check out. And are there printable versions of the best foods for protein, carb, and fat? Absolutely. I will include those. Yeah, I'll put it in the email for you guys so that you have those versions that you can utilize, and yeah, it can print it off and all that kind of stuff for you. The slide deck as well, you can print that off and you could select those specific pages, but I'll send you a more specific one that you guys can definitely print off for sure. So at what age does digesting protein start to become a problem, and how much more protein should be increased? Great question, Caroline. So there isn't really any kind of like set in stone age or time when it's going to start happening, but generally as we kind of get into say I would say our 50s and upwards from there, we're going to kind of start having a little bit more of a decline in that respect of things. And certainly when we get into 65 plus and 70, I mean, we often see a lot of older people, they don't eat as much, or they want to only focus on like tea and coffee because their body, like they put the protein in and it bothers their stomach. It sits for longer, doesn't go through as well. So it's just, they're not digesting it as well. So kind of in that age range for sure, they're starting to have issues digesting and breaking down food and stuff. How much to increase? Again, there's no real like hard and set answer as to like, you need to increase it this many grams. It's just going to be whatever kind of works for you. And so if you're going into older age with more consistent habits and eating more protein, you're going to have an easier time because your body's almost going to be adapted to that in a sense, and knowing that, hey, we need to keep up acid production in order to break down this extra protein that we eat. So you're going to be in a better place to keep mitigating and managing that. And yeah, so keeping that in mind. And then as you kind of getting older, it's going to be just trial and error, right? If you're finding you're getting hungrier, or maybe you're losing strength, or maybe you're gaining weight or something like that, figuring out how much that you're at and trying to mitigate and manage. Again, that whole one gram times your goal body weight would be a fantastic marker to kind of go with, and that's going to be a higher protein intake as well. And I think the general minimum, the general minimum, let me look that up. I will see about adding that, or I'll make a video about that, but I think it's like 1.6 grams per kilo is kind of a number that I'm recalling. Anyways, sorry, I kind of went on a ramble there, but hopefully that provides you kind of a little bit better idea there. Thank you. Great content and love your delivery. It's lunchtime here. Need to feed the kids. We're still in lockdown. Absolutely, Dana. Thank you for coming on. Thank you for the compliment. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for making this journey less overwhelming. Would someone in a wheelchair still follow the same calorie calculation formula? Really, really great question. And in general, yeah, I mean, it would kind of, again, give you a starting point and kind of figuring that out. And if you're finding, hey, I've done this consistently for 30 days, 90 days, whatever, and we're still either not seeing any weight loss, or we're seeing weight gain, or I'm too hungry, or I'm too full, then you're going to adjust. But for the most part, this calculation can be used kind of across the board, no matter how sedentary you are. And generally, in a wheelchair, yes, you're going to probably be more sedentary, but you might not as well, right? You might do lots around and lots of arm exercises and stuff like that. And you might be up and down depending on what you're in the wheelchair for. So it still definitely can be used. And again, it can be used kind of as a starting point, and you can adjust from there depending on how the progression and stuff like that is going for you. So yeah, fantastic question. Super helpful. Thanks. My pleasure, Caroline. Awesome. Yeah, fantastic set of questions, everybody. As I said, I will be posting this up on YouTube. It'll be unlisted because you guys obviously paid for the session and stuff like that. So you will have the exclusive access to it. And so you can go back and watch, rewatch, what have you. Again, if you ever have any questions, you've got my email and everything like that. I will be sending out the Eventbrite link, and I will include those resources for everybody. And yeah, if there's any other questions or anything, feel free to fire them my way. Ask me on Instagram. I generally do kind of an Ask Me Tuesday or what have you every week, or ask me on TikTok. I haven't been as good on lately, but yeah, fire my way and I will do my best to answer them.